Good stuff.
Okay. My name is Scott Nielsen. I'm the Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. Laura Belknap is with us, I believe, on the telephone. Is that correct, Laura? She was. We're not popular enough yet, but hopefully she gets back with us. Followed up by Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. Our board chair is with us, Mark Huntsman, and then board member Sean Newell. So let's go ahead and get started, and we have a few technical difficulties that we're working through.
No, we're good. We've got it displayed now. Stuff now.
Okay, so the first order of business, 4.1, is our section review. Let me see.
See it up, Chair. Okay. Chair, thank you. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. So the purpose, this is a perpetual agenda item for the Finance Committee. What it does is it allows each one of your sections to come forward to provide at that particular time or during the Finance Committee meeting where the status of their section budget. As you know, as all Finance Committee members know, we provide an inclusive and very thorough monthly budget report during the main board meeting or the main board meeting agenda. What this allows for is a deeper dive by section, on a monthly basis. So we invite Deputy Superintendent Policy Angie Stallings and to detail the status of their budget, which I will attest is in good shape, and answer any questions or concerns. What we also do is we provide backup documentation in line of a PowerPoint presentation specific to the section so that both you as members of the Finance Committee and the public can better understand what the requirements or operational aspects of the particular section that we're reviewing and how deep they go and how it ties into their budget and the purpose of the funding for their particular operations overall. So, Chair, subject to your questions, if you
go ahead, Angie.
Hey, great. Good morning, or actually good afternoon, everyone. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy, and I've got here with me Whitney Phillips, who's your Chief Chief Privacy Officer. And my budget's pretty bland and not super exciting because for the most part it funds personnel and then travel-related expenses, stuff like that, but related to the four people in my section of the overall budget. And then there's a second large program under policy and communication, which is student data privacy, which also includes 4 to 5 staff now with the addition of Randy Raphael, as well as probably some more interesting tools that you may want to hear an update on, like the metadata dictionary. And I would defer to Whitney to review her portion of the budget. But if you look on that second page that Scott's got showing right now, you can see that it's broken out into Chief Privacy Officer. That's the budget that Whitney oversees for she and her team, including the metadata dictionary costs and other related costs. And then you can see the administration line item, and that's for Kathy Helgeson, Jeff Van Holten, and myself, and related expenses. And then we have a separate budget for our program analyst, which is Jill Curry. A part of our team, and you'll see if you were looking at the PowerPoint, we also have Ben Rasmussen, the UPAC section, and also Sybil Child, who's the legal assistant, my legal assistant. They are in a separate budget called Law and Legislation, but we did include them in the PowerPoint so that you understood kind of like who we are as a team. And then, Whitney, would you like to just give a high-level overview of some of the projects you fund out of your budget?
Sure. Student data privacy is funded by state funds through the Student Data Protection Act, which has some statutory requirements. The biggest one that Angie mentioned, or a large one, is called the metadata dictionary. This is a little bit of a misnomer. Essentially, it's a web interface that says where student personally identifiable information is given to by the the state, USBE, and also each LEA. So it's monitoring that. So as to whom is receiving that, whether it be a vendor, an external research evaluator, University of Utah, that is supposed to be up and functional. So that's one large part. The other part is making sure that all staff at USBE and all education entities that have access to student PII have a training on student data privacy. And so developing those materials, providing that training, we've done 23 in-person training to schools across the state this year, and also making sure that that training has some sort of quality to it. We also have requirements on policies, having each LEA having a data governance plan, and also do investigations of any kind of violations to both FERPA and the Student Data Protection Act.
Okay, very good. I have just a very quick question, because I know we talk a lot about student data privacy, and I'm pretty comfortable with it. Have we had any, has it, and I hope this is applicable, I want it to be obviously secure, but it's not, we haven't had any breaches, we haven't had any issues as far as, I know that's probably maybe for another committee, but I know that who else did I talked to before where we were talking about how we're constantly being hacked, we're constantly being, right. So, yeah, our IT. So I understand these things are extremely important. They're also costly, but it's very, very important. Are we still very solid in that realm? We've had, I'm asking, is the machine functioning exactly the way it should?
I don't oversee the machine per se. I'd have to defer to IT on that. They let me know whether there is a potential breach or not. I think that there's been some questions and some investigations, but nothing that is to Jared.
Nothing substantial that
Nothing substantial that
would cause problems.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So, over over operations, which IT is inclusive of operations, the machine is working well. I mean, we do get attempts. Our staff, the hiring of staff that are very proficient in data protection is obviously an asset to us, along with where we're heading with USIMS and the hardware necessary to ensure that the data is protected. We have a great cooperative relationship with Director Phillips and IT, so that, to her point, if there's any indication of a potential breach or a breach of the data, we would notify. We also have plans in place that, if that unfortunate event would occur or does occur, that we can respond accordingly, depending on what the type of the breach is. So not only are we proactive on the front, but we're also proactive should something unfortunate occur.
Excellent. The reason I bring this up is because this is of such importance that, Whitney, with you, Deputy Superintendent, I want to ensure that you guys have the necessary resources to include funding, which is always the most important one, that you have not only the employees you need, you have the technology you need, so we can prevent that as much as possible. So.
And one thing that I would just say as a call out, as a positive to our legislature and the board, is the significant investment that the legislature made in student data privacy back in 2016 and 17, where we are lauded across the nation as having a very good program to protect student data, because of the investment the legislature made a number of years ago, where they've dedicated $800,000 in ongoing revenue to this program, which results in supports for our school districts and charter schools. We do, as Whitney stated, we maintain the data dictionary, the metadata dictionary, which at one point the legislation would have required every LEA to do their own metadata dictionary, and they do have to input into our metadata dictionary, but that has been a cost savings by having us do that here at the state, and takes the load off of our school districts and charter schools. And then Whitney and her team, they're somewhat famous for the videos that they provide on training to the to LEA staff, educators, administrators. And so I don't mean to toot our own horn, and it's not me,
That's
because
okay.
a lot of
Please
the
do.
work is
Please do.
really Whitney. But I would just say that we do have, we are grateful to have a good amount of resources, to have the 4 to 5 staff that, I guess we have 5 now, staff that are ensuring that we're maintaining our policies. We're ensuring that LEAs understand how the data should come in, how it should be handled by the humans, that interact with that data, and that we have good policies. So I think we're doing well.
I think so too. Okay, outstanding. Any other board members have any other questions? Michelle, Sean? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Now we'll move forward with the
Director and superintendent.
okay, yeah. Finance Director Empey and then Superintendent Joel Coleman come up, and this is an action item for the Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind, the state fiscal year 20 budget review. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. This is our first time we've ever presented the budget to you. So before we start talking numbers, I think it'd be helpful to talk about our process that we go through so you know how thoroughly each unit is vetted. This process begins in the 1st of February, and we just finished it up last week before we had to submit it in time for your agenda. Each of the associate superintendents meets with each of their directors, and they sit down and they review staffing, and then they review all of their expenses and what programs that they want to have funded. Then they compile each of the unit budgets, and then they submit that to us. We compile it into this summary sheet. We sit down with them, we compare, we take it back to zero-based budgeting. So they have to justify every increase or requested increase over what they've had in previous years. So it basically goes back and retools their entire budget. We sit down then with Superintendent Coleman and review the list and go through it and ask a lot of questions and vet the process. The associate superintendents sometimes go back and revise their individual budgets, unit budgets if necessary, and then we make those appropriate changes. The biggest moving factor of this is our personnel. Personnel is about 80% of our total budget. So it's going through the personnel array, each position, calculating what the annual increases are going to be based on information we get from Deputy Scott Jones on the average increase that the teachers are to be awarded. Then we figure out wait to see the legislature and to see what the cost of living adjustment is going to be, and then we calculate that for all the non-contract employees. Once we do that, then Superintendent Coleman and I sit down. We usually have 2 to 3 meetings, go through this and spend hours going over it, making sure we're comfortable with what we're funded from the legislature with our appropriations and what the total budget's going to come out to be. So that's a brief 30,000-foot overview of what's happened the last 2.5 months and coming through. This year, the legislature appropriated us $42,702,000. If you go to the bottom right of that chart that's up on the screen, you'll see that the budget for this year, go over, I'm not sure what column it is because I just got to print out.
What's the name of it?
Is the spreadsheet that you're on, right there. That 43,932,617 is what we are proposing for the budget. Now, one may ask, well, you're only given $42.7 million. Why are you requesting $43.9 million? We have 2 programs in addition to the base budget. The base budget is coming in at $42,384,000. So we're coming in just over $300,000 less than what our appropriations are. So we actually are being conservative with and not utilizing the full appropriation. In addition to that, we have carry forward funds, which we can carry forward up to 5% of our appropriations and our revenues. In this budget, we're estimating that to be about $556,000. That's a little tricky because we're only 9 months into the year. That's our best forecast as to where we're going to be, around $600,000 by the end of the fiscal year. In addition to that, we've got the Enrichment Fund. Enrichment Fund is the funds that we're projecting right now for the land grant trust funds, and that totaled about $991,000. So if you add in the enrichment funds and we add in the carry forward, that gets us to the $43.9 million. I'd be happy to answer, Joel and I, Superintendent Coleman and I, would be happy to answer any questions about any of the specific units or the budget process or any of the numbers that you may have.
Okay, you mentioned it real quickly. You mentioned it's that 5% you can carry forward.
Correct.
So is it generally speaking, you've been carrying forward the 5%, or is it carrying forward 2% or 1%, or is it always the 5%, or where are we with
It
that?
fluctuates every year. Last year we had just about $2 million, so it was roughly about our 5% threshold in coming through. We had a lot of positions that weren't filled, so we had a lot of vacancy savings that generated that amount. We were able to do a lot of improvements to our facilities with those funds. This year we only project around $600,000.
So as that money's being carried forward, then you have, superintendent, you guys have the leeway to exercise that, and you have tremendous discretionary ability to spend that wherever you feel like it's necessary for capital improvements and those types of things.
Any one-time spending, we take out of that, and that way we don't have to go invest additional money for
Legislature. Okay. All right. I don't have any questions. Go ahead.
But everything they do, though, it's transparent. It's all in the
Right.
budget. And change the budget. So you've reported on two things that are in here. We have two separate actionable items. Still with the budget
I
first.
think you want to talk about enrichment funds second.
Okay.
Budget, but,
Right.
so I didn't want to have. I don't have any questions on.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, can I make a motion? Well,
Go ahead.
Sure.
Chair Huntman.
make the motion that the Finance Committee make the recommendation to the full board to adopt the Utah Schools for the Deaf and the Blind fiscal year 2020 budget during the June 2019 board meeting.
Okay, so we have a recommendation by Chair Huntsman to adopt the 2020 fiscal year budget for the Utah School of Deaf and Blind. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Questions?
Enrichment funds.
Let's go to the enrichment funds action. This is also an action item. 4.3, Utah Schools for the Deaf and Blind, enrichment funds budget review. So let me click on that. See it.
Hey, while you're pulling that, maybe I can just talk about the process that we go through. The associate superintendents meet with Superintendent Coleman. They come up with their list of their projects. The enrichment fund, again, is the land grant trust money. It's funds generated from the land grant trust, and it's to be used to benefit the students in their education and experiences. This list is the list that has been compiled. The associates proposed it. Superintendent Coleman reviewed it with each of the associates. You can see there is a fiscal year 20 request column of $996,500, and Joel, Superintendent Coleman, approved $991,000 to be presented to the advisory council. The advisory council has a committee that met 2 weeks ago. They reviewed each one of these projects. They had discussions internally, and then they made the recommendation at the last week's advisory council that the council approve these projects and make the recommendation to you as the finance committee and to the board to actually approve it. So each one of these line items have been vetted. The total list is $991,000. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on any of the specific line items and programs.
You'll notice on this document, you can click on any of the programs on the left and it'll bring up a summary sheet of what that program is. Study.
I see that. Excellent. Well, I have no questions. Any members? Any questions?
I might just add that Chair Harrop, who's chair over our advisory council, her recommendations have been sent as part of the packet. If you haven't seen it.
Okay, well, do we have someone who would like to make a motion?
Make the motion that the Finance Committee make the recommendation to the full board to adopt the Enrichment Fund budget for state fiscal year 2020, 2019 board meeting.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to adopt the fiscal year budget for the School of Deaf and Blind Enrichment Fund for the 2020, what is it, 2020 fiscal year, correct? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's go to 4.4, request for discretionary funding. Mr. Jones.
Originally, when this agenda item was created or placed on the agenda for Finance Committee, we anticipated having a need to make a request of the Finance Committee to recommend to the board for additional funding out of your discretionary account for a website, for further development of our website, specific to a particular section. Since that time, we have found the ability to meet the requirements of the section without having to ask you for the discretionary fund.
Okay.
So I respectfully request that the Finance Committee consider just a removal of this agenda item at this time.
Well, you want a motion?
Yeah.
Make a motion that we move 4.4 from our agenda.
We have a motion to remove 4.4 from the agenda item for today. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. 4.5, information requests for data information.
Chair,
ahead.
this is a perpetual agenda item, much like the section review, in which we allow opportunity in which opportunity is allowed for all of the Finance Committee members, any individual Finance Committee member of the group herein, to request any type of data and information that the staff would need to research or provide in a later meeting. So that is the purpose of this. We do it as an information item because obviously if you direct or any one of you direct us to research any particular topic for future development in the Finance Committee, that is what the purpose of this agenda item is. Therefore, Chair, I defer to you to ask any of the Finance Committee members if they are either waiting for any particular data and information that has been requested previously, or they would like us to develop or search any particular data or information.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is there any board members that have any specific requests or knowledge that they would like, studies they'd like to see happen through these? Go ahead, Chair Huntsman, please.
Today in our USDB meeting, there was a request for per pupil spending, and make a request that as USDB provides that it comes back to finance.
Excellent. So we have a request before us to, try to rephrase that, for a per pupil spending for the USDB.
And that was per school, and I can't remember the whole, exactly how it was worded, but it was in our one.
That's good. You understand the gist of what he's asking for.
We do.
Excellent.
Per pupil spending.
Per pupil spending. Correct.
Per schools.
Okay. Per pupil spending per school. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, specific to
Jones.
maintenance operation or everything? Everything.
Excellent.
We're clear.
Moving on to 4.6, information, recognition of progress, achievements, and/or improvements.
Chair Nielsen,
Yes,
this is
please.
a perpetual agenda item as well. What it's intended to do is allow the opportunity for staff to advise the Finance Committee or call out to the Finance Committee line of recognition of progress, achievements, or improvements. For this month's purpose, draw your attention, or the Finance Committee's attention to the administrative content section, and we can move this up in public content if you want us to. But basically, this is an information exchange between our internal audit director, Debbie Davis, and the Office of the State Auditor. What it does is it confirms that the state auditor will not be testing any federal grants at USB this year They will still follow up on last year's Title I findings, they'll be contacting us shortly to do that. So what's the relevance of this, or why is it a progress or improvement? Over time, or basically the auditor decides to audit essentially on what's called a risk base, right? So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had significant audits and significant audit findings. By way of the fact that we've addressed those and taken corrective actions, what you're seeing right now is basically a message from the state auditor that due to, there's always risk, but due to the fact that we have taken such great steps or strides to get our house in order, if you will, they're backing off on the amount or frequency of the audits in line with risk-based audit procedures. What that does is it sends a clear message to you as board members and to the public that we're doing very, very well in our fiduciary responsibilities. Now, that doesn't mean that we'll become complacent or anything like that. We all know that we're subject to the audits, and we will continue to do, to impose the internal controls that we've set into place, that were set into place even by my predecessors. We'll continue to expand on their work as well, and then assure that should the time come again when programs are audited, either by the Office of the State Auditor or our own internal auditors, that the findings are in line with acceptable application of internal controls and ultimately the safeguarding efficient control of our finances and management. So we look at this as a significant achievement. And Jamie, do you have anything to that? Covered enough? Okay, so we've got Jamie's name.
Excellent. Any questions or concerns from the members of the committee? Excellent. So moving on.
Good work.
Moving on, 4.7, teacher supplies and materials work group update.
Information purpose on this one, Chair. I've got a lot of questions about, in previous meetings, we established the scope, or the board has approved the scope of this particular work group, so I won't get into too many details about that. One particular point that was mandated by the board was that we make this work group inclusive of educators. We did, within the last couple of weeks, get 3 educators identified to be part of the work group. However, we all know that school's still in session.
Right.
So we're going to be accommodating of their schedules so that we still meet the intent of the board to report back on the timeline that was established. And that's really what this information is for, is to update you on the fact that we're still making progress. However, because we want to be inclusive, which we are of all the things we try to do here, of our LEAs, but especially those subject matter experts, the first meeting may not take place until either the end of this month or the first part of June, so that we allow for them to finish their work and then they can participate.
Outstanding. Any of the committee members have any questions? Excellent. Moving on.
It is a quiet
Through
committee.
It is a quiet committee.
Ran
Okay, we'll
out of
speed
words.
right through this. Right? Yeah. Okay, 4.8 is Box Elder School District Monitoring Report.
As has been set by way of the process or procedures, anytime that a monitoring report, last month we provided the information on the monitoring report for AISU along the lines of the same procedure or process. Anytime there's findings of by way of the monitoring that took place, we provide you the information, and also it allows for the process to take place where the particular LEA will be allowed the opportunity to appeal. What you're seeing in, draw your attention to the administrative content on the Box Elder final report. Our special education expert, Neil, is here. He was the monitor for the special education section or the monitoring of Box Elder. I'd like to just recommend to the Finance Committee that we take just a short pause here and allow you time to go through the monitoring report if you haven't had the opportunity to do so. That way, if you do have questions or concerns, you can address them with the monitor, Mr. Neal.
Okay.
Karen,
I've already
if I can clarify something too.
Go ahead.
It is titled Box Elder Final Report. Actually, what we'll do in the future is we'll do LEA title, right?
Right.
Initial report, because we always are conducive to the appeal process. So the actual final report will be, and it could very well be that an LEA doesn't appeal. So then we would come back with the final report. And this process has relevance to the final agenda item, which is 4.114.
Right. Questions from any of the board members? Comments? John? Okay,
I've got one. So when do we?
please, Chair.
When do we suspect the final?
Yeah, when the final report will be produced.
This time, Chair, will you recognize and ask Mr. Stevens to come
Yes, please,
forward?
Mr. Stevens, come forward. That's my bad.
So, and the reason why as he's approaching is I want to make sure I explain the process to you, but having him up here is he can always clarify or correct me on the process. So basically what the process is by way of you're seeing this initial report for your review, is from the time that the LEA is notified of the findings of the monitoring, they have 30 days to appeal, right, and provide a letter of appeal. Okay, so we've notified them of that in this initial letter, correct, ma'am?
Right.
So we'll monitor that process, and by way of arriving at the 30th day from the date this letter was sent to them, then, like I said, some LEAs may choose to appeal and others may not. So if they do choose to appeal, then we'll gather the information from them that they want to present to appeal the initial findings, which basically is we allow ourselves another 30 days. Because you'll also note in there that if there are federal findings or federal amounts, that they have 90 days to pay that amount back. Is that correct, Neil? So basically we take what amounts to a 30, 60, 90-day approach,
review.
right?
Okay.
So we notify them of the findings, we give them 30 days to appeal, then we give ourselves another 30 days to review all of the documentation or whatever they find in the appeal, so that it's conducive or allows for the fact that if there are findings specific to the federal amounts, that there is a timeline which they'll have to pay us on, so, or pay back the federal funding. Neil, do you have anything to add to that?
Background information, we do routine audits by risk. We assess the risk of the entity based on previous audit intervals, whether or not they have a set amount of funds, whether or not they have a new staff in place that may increase their risk. We also assess they have new systems in place. And every LEA across the whole state is a general assessment every year. And then we give priority to the higher risk entities. In this case, this entity fell at a higher risk throughout the year, and we visited them in November. Findings with them, did a complete finance review of their expenses allocated to special education. I read all documentation they had at the time, presented them with findings. Brief summary is they had assistant principal at a school is being charged special ed. They had a technology specialist also, and a few smaller item purchase. I believe one of them was cell phone use, and there's a minor other item there. But that's the extent of the findings. And at the time of the visit, the this administrator Boxell indicated that he was going to pursue appeal. He was okay with the findings, understood that he had some deficiencies to correct.
Okay.
That satisfies I just thought it would be good for the board to know what that process was and
Oh,
what
that's
we
great.
can expect to get when we expect to get closure on it.
I don't have any further questions. Any further questions from members of the board? Exciting bunch. Excellent. Moving on, 4.9. Thank you very much.
4.9 is a action requested by staff in which in previous meetings we've made the board and the public aware of what's called the Statewide Longitudinal Data System Grant or funds. This is specific, and I call the Finance Committee members' attention to public content, which is the background portion, which essentially breaks out or what we're requesting from the Finance Committee. Essentially what has been requested is USB's projected surplus of grant funds, which is fine. It's okay. We get the SLDS grant. As we approach the end of the project, UTEC requests an additional $180,000 for a new software developer to join their team and continue through September 30th of 2020. My understanding is this is in line with acceptable uses of the funding, of the grant funding. It would allow for use in the period of availability. There's some other factors that take place with that, such as extension of the grant, but we've covered down on those as well, so that we can bring this to you for further action or development. Essentially, the requirements would be that the developer would focus primarily on automation of UTEC reporting protocol and of all possible data elements impacting research done by external entities. For example, there are 5 or 6 iPads, and I may need to defer to Aaron, and I don't see him here, or Albert on what iPad stands for. Survey that UTEC college complete manually, causing data errors. Additionally, UTEC colleges largely interpret the iPad survey's instructions differently, causing incompatible data to be reported to the federal government. So I'm going to stop there. You know, I don't think I need to read everything word for word. I just want to make sure that you have the gist of the request, because of the dollar amount and the fact that it is a grant. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to vet this, and then we respectfully request, and you find that in the action portion or the recommended action, that the Finance Committee make a motion or recommendation that the internal agency agreement between USB and UTEC get modified to allow for $180,000. So that's the key there. So we've entered into an initial agreement with UTEC. So that's why we need your support or action by way of a motion, so that later on we can, depending on what, we can put the updated IAA into the board's consent calendar, and it ties into the fact also that by way of the amendment to the IAA, it's going to also allow for the increase or the amount of the $180,000.
Understood. So, are there any questions? Someone want to make a motion to this?
Right. One more clarification. So I do want to know what IPADs mean. It's integrated post-secondary education data system.
So I understand this as it's just the most layman's term possible, system of software that keeps us out of trouble. Excellent.
Yes.
Okay.
That's actually that's what we put.
Yeah, that'll
I
solve
would have
further-
taken 15 minutes to say that. So
well, let's do that. Okay. Can we get a motion by somebody? Anyone want to make a motion to move this forward before the full board?
Motion to accept the, statewide longitudinal data system funds.
Excellent. So we have a motion to.
Did I do it right?
Yeah. We have a motion to move before the full board the statewide longitudinal data system funds of $180,000 before the full board. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is unanimous. Okay. 4.10. School fee revisions, cost center, accounting work group requirements.
Chair, for this one, I just need to make a clarification on the recommended action. What we're actually doing here is asking for the Finance Committee to approve what I'm going to describe as the timeline for this specific requirement by way of House Bill 250. The recommended action implies that we have the scope of work in front of you right now. What we're requesting is a motion that supports or recommends to the board that the following timeline be allowed for. If you'll note, House Bill 250 requires for us to report back to the legislature in November of 2020.
Yeah.
So what we'd like to do is, in light of the earlier update on teacher supplies and materials work group, we also have a NEST work group going on, a transportation work group, local replacement work group. So what we're asking for, staff respectfully request that the Finance Committee make a recommendation to the full board that the staff provide the initial scope of work to the Finance Committee no later than September of 2019, and subject to approval of the board, of the board in the October meeting commence the work group no later than November of 2019. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay, because we're asking you to, we're recommending this timeline, and we're at.
So we can be
way
ready
of
by
your
the
motion-
30th of 20, November of 20.
Right, because it's November of 20, so it gives us a full year to run the work group.
Correct.
And then come back, but what it also does is puts on the record that you're requiring staff provide you an initial scope of work, you, the finance committee, in September, that, you know, if all things go by way of the process, that the board would ratify in October, so then we could start scheduling the meetings of the work group in November of 19.
Gives us
To
a year to
meet
finish
the
it.
requirement of the November 2020 report back to the legislature. I hope that makes sense. So, I apologize.
You broke
for
it
the
down
wording,
Barney style. I
for
love
the-
it.
For the action on there, you know,
So-
I cut and pasted from the previous teacher supplies and work group where the scope of work was done. But this is the same process we take.
Adapt, overcome, sir.
Right,
We made it
okay,
happen.
thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So do we have a motion before us? I'd like to make that motion.
I move that we approve the formation of a working group. Is that what it
The
is?
first part would be direct staff to provide the scope of work for the working.
I move that we request that staff provide the of work for the working group.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to direct staff to provide the scope of work for the working group.
By September of 2019.
Excellent. And so we have a motion to direct staff to organize and move forward a working group by September of 2019 in preparation for the 30th of November 2020 deadline.
They won't organize. Right?
Just the scope.
It's just, they're gonna come back with the scope of work. No, the motion is to have staff provide the scope of work
To the finance committee.
to the finance committee,
By September of 2019.
Okay, so the motion,
and the other will follow.
You need to have a motion, or is it just like a request?
Make
If
a
you give us
direction.
the motion, then it documents the timeline, but it also demonstrates that the board is aware of the requirement to report back to the legislature in November of 2020. So we're publicly acknowledging the requirement in HB 250 by way of this process. I know, it's the timeline.
no, I understand. I just want to make sure that the motion's done correctly. So let's do that one more time. So we have a motion before us to direct staff to provide the scope of work requirement by September of 19 to the finance committee. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for being here, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 411 is also an action item, R277477, distributions of funds from the trust distribution account of the administration of the school and land trust program.
Chair, this time we invite Director Paula Plant forward. She's the director of the Trust Lands Group, so got to do the procedure, Paula. So.
Paula, come on up and grab a seat. Welcome.
The purpose of this action is to amend R 277-477. But that's okay.
He's upstairs.
You texted him? Okay. I think we can go ahead and start, because if you have any questions, Paula, I know for sure.
Okay, so the next three agenda items are actually recommendations coming to you from the Trust Advisory Committee that advises you on issues related to the trust and school committee councils. This rule change is primarily changes that need to be made based on the last legislative session. I don't know if you want me to go through them or just have you ask questions.
We'll go ahead and go through it, and then if we have any questions, we'll address them.
Okay, line 22 is a change from the,
So let me clarify. So are we on draft 2?
we are on draft 2 blue with the new text.
Okay, so draft 2, blue new text is displayed for the public and all of you in here. So as Paula calls out the line items, the line number, I'll scroll to that, but then also finance committee members can follow.
Track it.
Which line, Paula?
So 22 is a result of the TSSA plan. So that just is, that's clarification there. If you turn the page to line 56, that's the same thing there, it just changes that reference. And then lines 57 and 58 are from a bill that Senator Escamilla ran, SB 55, that allows charter trust land councils, grandparents can serve in parent positions. So that makes that change on line 64. 5. This is a result of a bill by Representative Stratton, House Bill 303, that now gives school community councils responsibility related to school safety. Turning the page then over to line 121, there was a question about the dates, the due dates, when districts and charter schools needed to submit their plans online. And this is just a clarification that what we're talking about on line 121 are district schools.
Okay.
Because charter schools on line 94 have a different due date.
We had a correction also on line 67.
Oh, yeah, 67, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. Line 160, when the bill that created the TSSA plan eliminated the school improvement plan, there was a requirement in the school improvement plan for school community councils to review assessment data. So when that bill went away, that requirement went away. But everything that the school and trust program is based on is for councils to look at their assessment data. So we put it in the rule. Line 177, referencing that school safety bill, House Bill 303. And that's true on 178, 179. Okay, so I think we're all the way over to line 240, 242. And this has to do with some cleanup that we have been working on, and I think this will be the final piece, where it used to be that the School Children's Trust section reported directly to the board, and our reports went to the audit committee. Then a bill a year ago, House Bill 404, that created a new advocacy committee. You remember all of that? So now the section reports to the superintendent instead of the board. So this creates cleanup, because at that time, audit reports to the audit committee were coming from the School Children's Trust section related to compliance reviews. This was getting to be a little bit confusing and time consuming for the audit committee. So this is just clarifying that we will make our reports to the superintendent, and any compliance review issues that need to be dealt with will be dealt with by Rule 277114, which is already in place, that deals with when schools have to pay back money or do something like that. So that's what that's about. And the changes that change includes the changes on 270 through 273. So it deletes some language there, and then the whole last subsection 9 of the rule.
Okay, no, fantastic. Any questions any board members have? Michelle? Okay, this is an action item. Let's move this forward. Can I get a motion for somebody?
I have questions.
Oh, Laura, sorry, I forgot about you. You're invisible.
Sorry, you better not. Okay, line 64, Paul, remind me again, what does that do for charters?
Which line?
64, I think it was.
64 is it 57 and 58 with charter school?
School safety principles is line 64.
Oh, the school safety principles. This is the bill that came from Representative Stratton, House Bill 303. And school community councils now have a responsibility related to school safety. This just adds that as one of their responsibilities in
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Okay, you just mentioned something where it was just charters, but now I've got clarity. And then Chair, I have one more question.
Please go.
Okay, I think you said line 117, where it's 117, where it's going to change, and the report's going to superintendent when money needs to be returned. Was that a statute change, or is this a rule change?
the rule change that instead of following what has been in this rule and in also in 491, had a process for the School Children's Trust to report to the audit committee, and there was a process in place in the rule that had to do with dealing with schools that needed extra attention after the compliance review. This just now refers to a rule you already have in place that deals with that. So instead of having our own process, we will just be under Rule 277114.
Oh, okay, that gives me much more clarity. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Want a motion?
Yeah, I want a motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion that the Finance Committee approve R 277-477 draft 2 on first reading and full board to approve second and final reading.
Probably said it too right. Okay, we have a motion for the committee to move forward R277-477 as amended, and it would be draft 2 to come before the full board for consideration. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's go to 412, which is R277-419, School Community Councils.
Chair, if I may.
Please go.
We invite Ben Rasmussen forward. He's, helps or assists our staff in writing these rules. He was engaged upstairs in another committee meeting for the first one, which we just covered. But in case there's questions with either this one or the next agenda item, I'd ask you. Paula, I defer to the chair.
No, go ahead, please. Elaborate.
Okay, so this is another recommendation coming to you from the Trust Advisory Committee.
I want to say, Paula, so are we on draft 2?
Yes.
Need to point that out. So draft 2, right?
Draft
So
two.
this
May
one?
1st.
Blue, new text.
Blue, new
Got it.
text, okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so if you will move to line 79 and 80, this is another change referencing the Teacher and Student Success Act. And then on line 84, this is coming at the request of councils that call and say, what minutes need to be posted online? How do we keep our minutes and so forth? And so the recommendation that came from the Trust Advisory Committee that 1 year of minutes should be posted on the school website as an information item for parents at the school so that they know what the council's discussing, decisions that they have made. Some councils have been posting 3 years of minutes on their website. Some haven't been posting any. So this clarifies for them what they need to do.
1 year.
That would current.
Cap it at 1 year, or can they still do their 3, or?
Well, they could. The law requires that they keep their minutes for 3 years, but they don't have to be posted on the website for
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So then, lines 103 and 104, this is, it actually goes down to 106. This clarify for councils in our elections. We have some councils they're holding elections, but they don't know how many people on their committee, hold an election, 10 people apply, have all 10 people on the council, or am I making sense? It's sort of like, in some years, everybody who applies gets to be on the council, and then the next year, everybody applies, they don't have room for 25 people on the council. So put in your rules of order and procedure, how many people are on the council, how many parents, how many school employees, and then each year when you hold the elections, you know how many seats are open, so that you can really hold an election. Okay. So that's what that is.
Now, really quickly, one question, because I'm not seeing this. That the number of people is up to them, correct? Excellent.
Well, there is a minimum in the code.
Okay.
They have to have at least 6 people on the council.
They could have 6 and just leave it
But
at
they
that.
can
or
have however many they
however
want.
Just has to be codified. Excellent. Okay.
Then lines 130 and 131, that's a reference again to the new school safety bill. And then this language that's all deleted to the end, again, it goes back to that change that we report to the superintendent, and our compliance reviews are under the direction of the superintendency. We don't go to the audit committee, and that we are subject to 114.
Okay. Any questions from any of the board members? Laura, any questions on the phone?
No, not on this one.
Outstanding. Somebody? Sean?
I have a motion to accept draft 2, R227-491.
277, 491.
277.
419.
491.
Is there?
I've got
491.
Yes. School community councils, on first reading for review by the board.
Okay, so we have a motion before us to accept R277-491 school community councils as amended to move for action before the full board.
On second and final reading.
Yeah.
You need to add that.
On second and final reading. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Excellent. 413, board policy 5007, trust advisory committee.
Goes to Director Plant and Rasmussen for further development with the finance committee.
I'll just point one thing out to start out with. We previously had a resolution that established the Trust Advisory Committee. We are in the process of converting all of our resolutions that form board advisory groups into policies, and so this is part of that process. And then Paula can talk about the updates that they wanted to make to that policy as we made that conversion.
Committee actually made a request to the executive committee that we wanted to make some changes to the resolution, so that's the reason for some of the changes that are here. And then Ben said we need to make this into a policy instead of a resolution. I think that the changes in 1A I don't think it's a substantive change, it's just rearranging the language. And that would be true in A and B. I think Ben has been language better. Is that right?
Trying to be more concise is all.
Okay. And I think that is true as well in number 2, the changes that are there. In item F, 2F, that is a substantive change, and again, this is realigning our reporting, that instead of going to the audit committee, we have responsibility to the superintendents. The language in 3A and is making the language better, and that would be true as well in C. So that's just writing the language. In number 4 or number 5, that has always been the case. We have been providing compensation for people who needed to travel. This just states that we do. So, moving down to the items that are really substantive in nature are in 11, right? These were the changes that the Trust Advisory Committee was actually recommending. Did have an issue with an individual who attended one meeting and really needed the input of that individual. And so what do we do in that situation? This just basically says we come back to you and we can make.
Okay, great.
And so that would be true if someone needed to resign, go through the same process, having you make a reappointment. The other part that is substantive is number 12, and instead of the section acting as a chair and a vice chair, that just seemed a little weird, and we were having a little trouble moving the process forward. Most committees have a chair and a vice chair that are not the staff. It's difficult to be the staff and chair a committee at the same time. So the committee wanted to elect a chair and a vice chair that were not staff. So this just clarifies that we actually did do that, elected a chair and a vice chair. The committee will now have a chair and a vice chair, and our section will act as staff to the committee instead of trying to perform a dual role.
All right, no, that's I like that change. Any of the committee members have any questions about which machines? Excellent. You get
I just want
Go ahead.
one comment. Kind of, I think we're getting to the tail end of everything with the trust line, and that is for Director Plant and Director Rasmussen. I always want to say first names, and I'm very respectful for all your good work. But all this was good. It was good housekeeping, not a bunch of add-ons, made it simple. Thank you for your good work on it. That's all.
outstanding, really. Yeah, so I was reading through that. Okay. This is an action item, committee members.
I move that we approve Board Policy 5007 Trust Advisory Committee and recommend to the board.
Excellent. So we have a motion to move forward Board Policy 5007 Trust Advisory Committee before the full board. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your time. All right, shake and bake, 414,
Chair?
please.
414 is in line with the processes that I explained in relation to agenda item 4.8, which is that
Yes.
compliance reviews are conducted on the LEAs in accordance with the Code of Federal Regulations, local regulatory requirements. When the findings, then the findings are detailed to the LEA by way of notification. Then the LEA has 30 days to respond your appeal, okay? So specific to AISU, their notification was sent out. They had 30 days to appeal. I'm pleased to say that they did file their appeal. They did come back to us and requested a couple of additional days. And I think that was, we were supportive of that because they wanted to do their due diligence, not rush to, provide, they wanted to make sure that they were providing us everything that they felt was relevant and did so. So I just wanted, for what it's worth, commend them for the process that they took in filing the appeal. So the appeal is with us right now for review. So it goes to the 30, 60, 90-day process that I explained in relation to the box elder,
Correct.
right? For agenda item 4.8. The key here, though, is that normally or typically what would happen is once staff have had the opportunity to go through the documentation. We would bring back the appeal, or our recommendations on whether to grant the appeal, the dollar amount change, or anything with it, to the Finance Committee. So that would take place in June. For recommendation to the full board, depending on what the circumstances are, or what, the staff recommend by way of the appeal process, in the June committee meeting, recommend to the full board in July. However, there isn't a July board meeting. So what staff are asking for is for the Finance Committee because our understanding, and this may need some more discussion, is that if all of the Finance Committee members make a recommendation for something to go into the consent calendar, it can. So what I would recommend is that, you discuss that, because what it will allow for is for the board to see the staff's recommendations or findings on the appeal in the June meeting. So, I know this is kind of an exception to the 30, 60, 90, but it is because we're always proactive and in support of the process. And, with the circumstances of the fact that the board isn't currently scheduled to meet in July, I think it would be productive and conducive if you recommend or allow, and I think it has to be all of you consent to it going into the consent, that it would be productive for us to be able to do that, to first and foremost, given the circumstances with AISU that are going on right now, to communicate back to them what the staff is recommending or not recommending, as far as what the appeal. Does that make sense?
It does.
Because that way, we'd still be within the 30, 60, 90-day time frame. Because right now, and rightfully so, everybody's tracking the payback time frame if, depending on what is found by way of the appeal process, is roughly June 30th, 90th day, too. So it allows for the board to see, or recognize what is occurring without having to meet in July. I hope that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
And I wouldn't have brought this up this way because the process would have followed. And so for instance, with the, the Box Elder one, the timeline's a bit different. So it'd be conducive to an August finalization, if that makes sense.
Okay, it does. Are there any questions? Laura, do you have any questions on the phone? Hi.
Yes, I do. I couldn't get off mute. Okay, so it's okay, Chair, if I ask him now?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Scott, so for clarity, has their board given a recommendation that they want to do AISU's board? Have they presented that to their authorizer? And what is the process moving forward? And maybe this isn't a discussion for now or here, but I would like to know if they do have process moving forward, just to be very clear, what was said and done on the news isn't exactly correct. And I think many people think that we have withheld money from them. And that is not the case. It's no different than is done in any school in the distribution of funds. So I just wanted to put that out. But Scott, so tell me where we are in this process.
Okay, so I think there's a lot of questions in that, if I may. So let me first of all address the piece that you stated, or your question regarding the withholding of funds. As of this date time group, no funds have been withheld. By way of the process, what we have communicated to AISU and their respective board members is that the state restricted funds are on what's called a reimbursable basis because of the associated risks that resulted from the findings. What that means is before we will send the state restricted funding, the school or the LEA has to provide documentation for that purpose. And I'm getting a positive reflection from our minimum school program director, coordinator, Jamie Barrett, to that. So does that answer your question specific to, again, I will go on the record of saying that we are not withholding any funds. The process is different. We're not distributing funds. specific to the state restricted funds until such a time as we receive the documentation to allow for the proper release or distribution of said funds. Does that answer that question?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and I just wanted that clarity out there because it wasn't depicted quite like that in the news, and that the distribution of funds isn't different to AISU than it would be to any other school in either in the same situation or how funds for special ed and different things are distributed. It's the same. So thank you.
Right. The standard is the same, but again, it's based on the establishment or recommendation, if you will, by the staff that says, hey, risk exists here. So, as it relates specifically to the state restricted funds in this case, that's the process that we're taking, and that is the standard that would apply should the circumstances be similar in any other case with any other LEA. Then, if I may, is there any other piece or part of the clarification? You mentioned something about the board and the authorizer. You can't see, or you're not here, but both Executive Director Lambert and Board Chair for AISU are here. Is this something that you feel like you want to have them address? Because I'm not sure. Could you repeat that part, or do you have everything clarified at this point?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to keep going. Okay. I want to know what the AISU board is asking of their authorizer, number one, and what are they asking of the state board? What are they asking of both of these entities moving forward?
I'll have you guys come up. Okay, stand by just a moment, Laura. We'll get the answers to the questions. And for the record, sir, could you please introduce yourself?
Kent Burgraff, Chairman of the Board, American International School of Utah.
Okay.
If I may.
Go ahead, please.
So I believe the agenda item, which is specifically related to the appeal, what we are asking of the State Board is to reconsider the amounts that were determined that needed to be repaid. And so those are clearly outlined in our appeal letter. The structure, that, as I understand it, doesn't necessarily involve our authorizer as much as they are aware of our appeal. But it comes to this committee and then to the State Board to consider whether to grant some or all of our appeal as far as those amounts determined.
Chair?
Okay, follow up.
Yeah, please go ahead, Laura.
Okay, so I guess my question would be to Mr. Burgraff then. With the amounts, and I haven't added them up, but my question being, if some are loose here in repayment, the feds are a whole other story, okay? But if they were smaller, is that really going to make any difference about the viability of AISU as is, how they are moving forward?
That's probably a much more complex question than can probably be answered in this committee.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'll take that.
Go ahead.
On that.
Yeah, Superintendent Jones,
So
please.
earlier, the same question was asked by the media about, what the potential impact could be. So what we have to do is we have to allow the process to take place. And the process, as I've described it, is for staff to have the time to look at what's been, rightfully so and adequately so, thank you, Chair, of AISU for doing so, for submitting that. We have to have the time to review it. And once we review it, because of what I brought up earlier, the schedule related to this, that it be allowed to go into the consent calendar, it's at that time that I think we'd all be, potentially able to answer Board Belknap's question on what the second and third level effects are, if any, of what is determined, or recommended by staff by way of the appeal process. So right at this point in time, I don't think any of us, I agree with the chair of AISU, that any of us we don't know until we know, right, what the findings are of the appeal process. And this is why we have this process and we follow the timeline, is so that we can all or make an informed decision on what to recommend or not recommend, depending on what the outcome will be.
Okay, no, that's clear.
Does that?
Laura, any other questions?
Yes, so I guess my question is, we are still in a conundrum, because if I have clarity on this, there are not funds to pay the teachers through the end of the school year, which is June 7th at AISU. However, we're now kicking the can down the road, and it's not going to be until like the week before so I'll take this offline. I have some real concerns, but I appreciate the process, Scott, but we need to put this on the consent calendar, and I think the comment or the motion needs to be, we put on the consent calendar with full details after the investigation is done, or after we look over the hearing reports.
I can make a clarification, Chair.
Yes, please. Laura, please stay on if you would.
Just because of the statement regarding teacher salaries, except for the special education teachers, the funds that are paid to the other teachers is actually not affected by these restricted funds. And so it's maybe an incorrect summary to say that there's not funds to pay teachers. It's just that at the end of the day, special education.
Just the sped funds.
I appreciate that. That's why I was asking that for clarity.
Excellent. Perfect. Well, any other questions from any other members of the committee?
So,
Go ahead, Mark.
all we're
Chair
really
Huntsman.
doing is instead of our finance committee getting the next round of recommendations, or when USBE does its due diligence on this appeal process, we're just giving up, by expediting what's being proposed here, we're just giving up the opportunity to discuss it in finance, and that discussion most likely will take place in our board meeting with possible action happening. So that's all that's being asked of us today. Is that true?
Is that correct? Yes.
Which we definitely can do. I hope it does become a precedent setting. That we do what we can do to accommodate time.
Excellent. So do we need to make this?
Chair,
Go ahead.
I have one more. Jennifer? Is Jennifer still at the table?
Negative. I'll bring her forward, though.
Oh, thank you.
So state your name.
Sure. Jennifer Lambert, Executive Director for the State Charter School Board.
Excellent.
Thank you. Miss Jennifer, my question is actually about the direction of the State Charter Board. And I know you can't say what they're going to do, but is AISU on your agenda as a topic of discussion moving forward with them?
Our next board meeting is next Thursday. We have not yet posted that agenda. We are somewhat waiting on AISU to understand what they're going to be doing.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.
So can I try to do a motion?
Yeah, please.
And which is a little bit unique, because normally we make recommendations, but we're not making any recommendations. Our recommendation is to move. Our recommendation is to move the appeal letter and process before the full board on their consent calendar for the June 2019 meeting. That's it. That's about as good as I can do.
Please.
So procedurally, my understanding is that we've established that if all of the committee members consent to it, that it can be placed in the consent account. That's right?
Exactly where it's at. So if this passes unanimously, then it goes before the full board. So that's my motion.
State the motion.
Not really, but I'll.
Because I.
Anyone get it?
I understand it. I just need it restated so I can
Okay.
restate it before the committee.
Do you want me to?
Please.
May staff make a recommendation on the?
Please do.
Okay. Staff recommends that the finance committee make a motion that the appeal letter findings of the Board of Education staff be placed in the consent calendar for the June 2019.
Excellent. All in favor, say aye.
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 Voting was unanimous. Thank you, sir, for coming. Okay, I don't have no more items on the finance committee. Motion to-
Can I make one more comment?
Of course you can, Laura.
I just want you to know I think Scott did a great job chairing today. Woo-hoo!
Okay, we miss you. Be safe out
Yes,
there.
exactly. Mark hit it right on the head. We miss you. That was his reply. Thank you. It was crazy.
It's an awkward thing.
Oh, yeah, well, I was completely.
You can't